I think it's a safe bet to say rest in peace, Medal of Honor. You were a franchise that was underrated, underappreciated, and sadly just did not live up to gamers' expectations and ultimately led to your demise. So rest in peace, Medal of Honor. You have served us well in the gaming community. Hopefully you will get a resurrection. Sadly, doesn't seem the case. But once again, thank you, EA, DICE, and Medal of Honor for giving us awesome games. And rest in peace, Medal of Honor. Well, now that that's done with, I gave Medal of Honor's proper farewell. What led to Medal of Honor being killed? What led EA and DICE to say, we need to shut down this franchise? This franchise is going nowhere. What led to the downfall of Medal of Honor? And everybody has their own opinions on the subject. I myself have a few opinions, and that's where this video comes in. I believe the downfall of Medal of Honor was a few factors that I'm going to talk to you guys about today. So let's jump right down to it. Let's go all the way back in time. Let's jump in our time machines and let's go back in time to 1999 when the first Medal of Honor was released for the PlayStation console. And honestly, even though by now standards, the game graphically was inferior, but that game was probably the nicest 3D game, had one of the best gameplay, best stories in a first-person shooter to date, and ultimately that game led to it being one of the top 20 best first-person shooter games of all time. But sadly, the franchise could just not capitalize on its own success. And we've seen it in other franchises, but not to this degree. And ultimately, it was the fact that they were chasing their own ghost and they just couldn't live up to their own hype. Now, jumping down a year later to 2000, the direct sequel, Medal of Honor Underground, just did not live up to the expectations of gamers and not live up to the height of his predecessor. Adding that, the most ridiculous port ever to be released, in my opinion, the Game Boy Advance port of Medal of Honor Underground was even worse than the PlayStation version. Did not help at all. Jumping down 2 years later after that, we had the first ever Battlefield 1942. So not only had Medal of Honor, already had to succeed because they were already down, they had to fight with a game that was in its own realm. Battlefield was considered a first-person shooter. It is a first-person shooter. Medal of Honor was a first-person shooter, both set in World War II. And not only did Medal of Honor had to fight, Battlefield for supremacy, a game that was in its own field, they had, Medal of Honor had to fight as well with the first ever Call of Duty title to be released a year later. So once again, you had a franchise that was already rocky because it was already still feeling the effects of its failure, had to now fight a game in its own backyard, basically, with Battlefield. And the fact is that, Medal of Honor was in PC at that time, and Battlefield was at PC. People were flooding to Battlefield. Why? Well, from the reports that I read, Battlefield had better graphics, better gameplay, and it had a better multiplayer experience than Medal of Honor. It was bad enough. It was bad enough that the game was fighting it in its own backyard, but yet it was failing as well. And not only that, it was failing with the time. Look at the 2000s where multiplayer was starting to pick up and it was starting to become mainstream. Multiplayer gaming has, at that time was becoming mainstream. Medal of Honor just was not embracing that. Battlefield, embraced that, and Call of Duty was slowly starting to embrace that as actually well. Medal of Honor just couldn't compete graphically when gamers wanted graphics. They wanted visuals. Medal of Honor just couldn't compete with that. And we start to see a downfall trend in gamers wanting a more, more violence, better visuals, more gritty down game. And Medal of Honor was still primarily, kid friendly. Moving on to 2003 with Medal of Honor Rising Sun. You would stab somebody and there was no blood. Gamers were moving to a more mature field than what Medal of Honor was used to. Moving on, Battlefield was kicking off. We had Battlefield 2. Moving on down to 2008 with Battlefield Bad Company. Oh my God, moving down. Whew. I remember Bad Company. Battlefield Bad Company was an awesome game. Great story, great characters, and just the fact that multiplayer, somebody was camping behind that wall, just take an RPG and you could tear down that whole entire building. Moving on, 2007 was Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Okay, that game pretty much single-handedly put a chokehold on console first-person shooters because that game just killed multiplayer. I mean, that game just, oh my God. Everybody had to play that game. This game was just killing it. This game made people purchase Xbox Live, basically. This game helped propel, the first-person shooter esport. So by the time EA finally released Medal of Honor, a remake, kind of like a remake reboot. It was a reboot of the series. They finally embraced multiplayer. They finally embraced the modern warfare era. But honestly, it was too late. It was too late. Call of Duty already had a vice grip hold on the online gaming community. And the fact is that in single player mode, Battlefield was already having a chokehold on that one because Battlefield was starting to get more elaborate with their single player campaign and then having a huge multiplayer. I mean, this thing was 64 player warfare with jets, boats, tanks, whatever you could think about it. There was no room really for Medal of Honor to actually grow. And given the fact that Medal of Honor was pretty much a propeller for Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, propelling them, there was no really field for the franchise to actually grow. And the 2010 Medal of Honor was a great game. Believe it or not, it was a great game. It had great visuals. EA finally embraced a good visual quality. The single player campaign was oh my God, I think it was better than Call of Duty Black Ops because Black Ops was released in 2010. It had better visuals, a better story, better storytelling. It had the recipe to be a great game. The problem was they took too long to embrace the modern day era. I mean, multiplayer was being compared to Call of Duty being too much of a Call of Duty clone. And then the single player just wasn't enough to convince people to jump on board to Medal of Honor. It just wasn't enough. And add that to the controversial single player storyline, which was supposedly based off of actual military, scenes that were going on in actual Afghanistan, and also with multiplayer using the actual word Taliban, and players could actually be played as the Taliban, and actually killing, U.S. and also, allied troops did not help the game whatsoever. There was actually a patch to actually remove the word Taliban and replace it with opposing forces. And then just finally, the nail on the coffin, Medal of Honor Warfighter, a direct sequel to Medal of Honor, was just completely destroyed by critics and fans alike. You know, that game just honestly did not live up. I actually played the game. I actually have the game. My cousin bought it and the actual DVDs, and passed it along to me. And the game was just filled with so many bugs, and then graphically, I mean, I don't know what engine they were using, but graphically, it just did not look good. It looked like a downgraded Battlefield 3. The story was weak, even though it had the actual characters from the first Medal of Honor 2010. I mean, it just didn't live up. The multiplayer was filled with bugs too. Servers were always crashing. And finally, that was just a nail on the coffin for the Medal of Honor franchise. And EA just sadly shut down the door. I mean, can we see a Medal of Honor reboot coming back series? I mean, they can, because Medal of Honor 2010, even though with Call of Duty and Battlefield pretty much having a firm grip, on that particular first-person shooter genre, Medal of Honor was still very successful. It was still very successful, and it still had a strong sale, and it proved that there can be other first-person shooters besides Call of Duty and actually Battlefield. Medal of Honor proved it. And if they truly wanted to, if EA truly wanted to, they could bring the franchise back. They could bring it back if they truly wanted to. Would they? Honestly, realistically, no. I mean, Battlefield is just kicking butt right now. Battlefront is coming back. EA just has a lot of games under their belt, honestly, that is more successful in short times than Medal of Honor. As a total, Medal of Honor, their whole entire series grossed around 40 million copies, and Call of Duty and Battlefield could do that in a few weeks. So honestly, I just don't see them seeing Medal of Honor as a profitable franchise, but we could always hope. So once again, guys, what do you think? Do you think my theories were right? Do you think my theories were wrong? Comment below, guys. Do you want a Medal of Honor reboot? Do you guys remember Medal of Honor in any way? Comment below, guys. I love to hear your comment section. Thank you guys for supporting my channel, for everybody that watches my videos. And once again, like, share, subscribe, comment on my videos, guys. I love your comments. And as always, have an awesome day.